a vitality to it, an intellect about it, right? And it has its own possibility of knowing, right? Turning upon itself. Therefore, this then is a copy of it, and therefore this is the realm where we are and all other living creatures. This must then include all intelligent living creatures, or all intellectuals, or, put in another way, the vital intelligibles, the primordial basic patterns of all that is, has a life and a vitality, and this is sometimes also called the forms.
Formula?
Forms, or forms, yeah. Now, in order for this becoming, this universe to come into existence, right, it has to be made visible, right? Has to be made visible, has to be made tangible, right? And he said, well, the principle of visibility is light or fire, and the principle of anything tangible is earth. So therefore, necessarily, for that universe to come into existence the way in which it has come into existence, to be visible and tangible, necessarily the primal elements must be fire and earth. And two things, of course, cannot be joined without a third, because you need something to bind them together. And whenever you have two things bound with a third, that's a mean analogy. And when you have a three-dimensional space, you need four terms, not three, and therefore between these he introduces two others, water and air. Now, they are principles. They're not fire and earth and water and air, right? But it is whatever it is that makes things visible, whatever it is that makes things tangible, whatever it is that makes things fluid and moving in a flow, right? Whatever it is that can bring things into a vitality, air. Therefore, these are the primary so-called elements understood in their sense rather than our own. They stand to one another in analogies. And he has two sets of them, right? So air is to water as fire is to air, water is to earth as air is to water. What does that mean? It means that all of the basic primal elements, or basic fundamental principles, are brought together into an analogy, which means they're harmonized. And if they're harmonized not only because they're put in an analogy, but they're created in such a way they can fit into an analogy, therefore by necessity they are harmonized. And that therefore allows us to say these things brought the current universe into existence. Now, let's see if we can, I'd like to read something for you first. He talks about this in two series of analogies, a three-term and a four-term analogy. And the most beautiful of bonds is that which most perfectly unites into one both itself and the things which it binds together. And to effect this in the most beautiful manner is the natural property of analogy. Therefore, analogy is a fundamental bond. Right? All this, it's a bond. It's brought together, harmonized and brought together. It is a bond. It's the fundamental bond that keeps everything in analogical relationships, and therefore in analogical relationships, therefore keeps them in such a way that can be said to be harmonized with one another in the most beautiful possible way, and therefore the infinity which is the behind all of the infinitude of forms and the infinite power of the universe, can be then said to have its counterpart, the bound. The bond shows itself in analogical constructions. The major terms for the analogical constructions come out of what appears to be necessary given a metaphysical universe in which man can then be brought to know. Let's see if we can see that now. Matter of fact, let me read it for you, okay? Out of my big book. Maybe I'm not going to do it for you. Ah. Now, when he uses the word science in this translation, they didn't know what sciences were in our sense of the word. It was anything, therefore, that was intellectual, that had a sound principle for the way in which its parts were ordered, and it had an ordering function, right? It's not our sense of the word science, which is something objective, something that observers independently can verify, that has empirical properties, etc., etc. Since the sciences which are in us, see, all the ways of knowing are called collectively the sciences in Plato. Since also the sciences which are in us, some look to one object of knowledge, such as medicine, some to health, but others extend to many, as arithmetic, to philosophy, to politics, many others. And this is not only the case with arithmetic, but also with the measuring science and with statistics. Statics. For Plato says that either all or some of the fabricative arts require the assistance of these, and without these, no accuracy. But others look to all the arts and to the contemplative sciences, as is the case with divining art, says Plato. Well, I like that, but that isn't the quote I wanted. Yeah, I do that sometimes, unfortunately. Yeah. Gee, it's not that far. Huh. For it appears to me, on this account, that Plato constitutes the soul from the first genera and from numbers, ratios, harmonic ratios, and likewise that he places in it the principles of figures, divine motions, in order that by causally comprehending the reasons of all disciplines and of dialectic, it might thus know all things, the essences, the numbers, the harmonies, the figures, and the motions of which